So here we are back in the Budget Home studio, and we're into the 12th of the 8th, 2015. It's a while since I've actually done a broadcast of news, philosophy, sociology, whatever. Lately been pretty preoccupied with doing some repairs around the house and working on my old Austin 10, a tiresome pastime. And I've had it for pretty close to 30 years. And I think it's time for somebody else to be the caretaker. I put a lot of energy into looking after this old car one way or another. And I sort of feel like I need a new interest somehow. I think I've sort of done the vintage Austin 10 to pieces, really. Yeah, so I've been thinking a little bit about, in between these various projects, one of my pet hobbies, which is sort of like, the study of eschatology in the Bible. I suppose I grew up with a bit of this in terms of background. You know what they say, of course, if give me the child for the first 7 years, I think it was the Jesuits that actually said this, and I'll give you the man. In my case, my grandmother had me for at least 7 years and indoctrinated me well and truly. And I'm not resentful about that. In fact, I'm grateful in many ways, because at least there was a kind of ethical platform that I grew up with, although I have to say I was a very misbehaving child, and as a teenager I caused my share of trouble as well. I think that's just actually part of being a teenager, actually. There's something wrong if you haven't caused some kind of trouble as a teenager. And I think as an adult, I certainly contributed to a fair amount of trouble because, I don't know, there was just something in the background that I inherited that caused me to want to challenge authority and to question everything. Just questioned everything. Not satisfied with a lot of what was told me. Yeah, and I guess I still have a fairly curious nature, so I'm kind of interested in doing new things because obviously I'm interested in new outcomes. Yeah, anyway, I've put a lot of time into thinking about how the Bible got assembled and Constantine's role in bringing that original compilation together. And, you have to actually continue to challenge your assumptions and the sort of things that hold your worldview together. And with me, I guess, kind of a belief, an ongoing belief like Tennyson, in a Memoriam, he talked about having faith and that we can't really know. I think it went something like this: we have but faith we cannot know, for knowledge is of things we see, and yet we trust it comes from thee. A beam in darkness let it grow. So the relationship between theology and philosophy and knowing has always been a kind of like on my radar, and I've always been interested, so I started reading philosophy when I was very young. And theology, of course I grew up with theology because I grew up with people who were Bible believers. That's something that's kind of like dropped away a lot now in some places, but in other places it's grown. For example, Peter Berger talks about the astonishing growth, Peter Berger, the sociologist, in the charismatic Pentecostal religion, fastest growing religion in the world, according to Peter Berger. So there is still an interest in it, and also the interesting part about it was that for quite some time sociologists believed that the secularization of society modernity would make man less religious. Well, in actual fact, according to Berger and everything else that I've read, it's turned out to be the complete opposite. We're more religious than ever. But there's still quite a strong influence, quite a secular chipping away at a lot of the foundational dogmas, and I'm not saying that's entirely a bad thing, but I am kind of like astonished at how poor the understanding is of people today that have gone through a secular education system, how poor their understanding is of the influence that the Bible had on culture. So, the relationship between Christ and culture, and the relationship between the Bible and culture, and what actually the main influences were in their outcomes. And it's really astonishing to see how few people really understand the philosophical implications of the Judeo-Christian influence. Even those that have gone through universities and got education, they are incredibly naive and uninformed about what it is that actually makes a good culture. And the other thing is very troubling, is the understanding of the limits of human reason, because we are finite, so therefore we have a limit to our understanding. You would think that would be sort of obvious to people as they, but not so. There's a kind of blind acceptance of the dogmas that come from the secular, from the atheistic and the humanistic philosophies that has been spun out since the Enlightenment. And unfortunately, a lot of Judeo-Christians, mainstream Christians, theologians, sat on their hands when they should have been actually digging around and looking for an understanding of the questions that were being developed, and what they always had the answers, but for some reason there was a kind of loss of faith. And I kind of understand all that because of the influence of war and so forth. I mean, after the First World War, theologians stood up on the Western Front, and, you know, the devastation, the whole thing was like just a huge mincing machine where human bodies were thrown in and minced up. The technology actually began to really have an impact on warfare. And when it was unleashed on the Western Front, the damage was just horrendous to human life and to the morale. And so people just thought, well, you know, not possible. God must be dead. There can't be a God on this basis. And, of course, with the concentration camps and so forth, various dark bits of dark humour were thrown into the mix from the Second World War. We don't talk very much, I guess, about the consequences of the nuclear weapons that we used, and that's got something to do with the way our culture has been controlled, our society, social constructions of reality, if you like. So the Second World War, the concentration camps, God never went to them. He wasn't visiting the concentration camps. And, you know, so there was some dark humour developed around all that. The interesting thing was that the people who suffered the most were able to sort of, I don't know, somehow have, you know, this dark humour about the tragedy that had taken place. And not all of them, of course, obviously, but, you know, there are a few writers who we're able to sort of make a point without, I guess, the best way to handle a serious issue that is to introduce humour, to deal with problems that are and actions that are just horrendous. So yeah. Anyway, so we got the church failing to keep abreast of the philosophical and scientific, but I am cautious about that term scientific, about the positivistic sciences that developed in the 19th, 18th and 19th century, but then fell apart with the analysis and criticism of people like Popper and Polanyi, Michael Polanyi, who demonstrated successfully that we couldn't have the dispassionate objectivity that had actually gained a currency. Had gained currency, yeah. Anyway, so yeah, that's kind of like. I also have been wondering about the east and western parts of the Roman Empire and how so many people somehow let it slip under the bridge, if you like, or it just dropped off the radar, that Rome had continued in Constantinople, Istanbul, Byzantine leg of the Roman Empire, and that from an eschatological point of view, the focus on end times and looking for the various anti-Christs and so forth had been concentrated on Rome, when in actual fact a Byzantine Constantinople, Turkey, was a place where they should have been looking as well. I'm kind of of the opinion that there's an argument that we've been kind of misdirected for the last few hundred years, maybe since the Reformation actually, and the understanding that Islam the challenges that Islam is creating. Anyway, that's enough for now, because this is actually 13 minutes and it's far too long for YouTube. But there you are. We'll hopefully be seeing Nick again shortly.